My brother and sister-in-law shared with us this week that they are expecting a baby. And I will be an aunt for the first time, yes, to a baby nephew around Easter. So I'm super excited. I thought about this sweet news and the memories that we would create with cousins and the tender moments that come with a newborn. And then I thought about the fact that this bright spot, this new baby, was discovered in the dark. Our life is full of sweet moments and dim situations that sometimes seem to glow with wonder or leave us doubting in all of the mystery. This Advent season, we are going to unpack the paradoxes that we weave through in life, and aware that we are just as darkness can be oh so encompassing. Just a tiny pinprick of light changes it. In fact, eliminates it by definition. Light and darkness partner together in the mystery of the cosmos from the beginning and comes wondrously into our everyday realities, in and with Jesus. Will you pray with me? God, may the words of my mouth and the meditations of our heart be acceptable to you. May they illuminate something new from you in ways that they change us, that they take us forward, that they allow us to be the light that you have us to be in our specific places in this universe. We pray all of this in your Son's name. Amen. God's vision of the world is life. The Word was the source of life, and life brought light, John 1 said. I'm sure you can capture a tangible image of light, maybe the literal expression of light in your head. Think about it for a moment. And if you are a metaphorical kind of person, go with that too. What's the light in your life? Think on it. And anyone want to share, what does light in your life look like?
My grandchildren.
Grandchildren.
This lady sitting next to me.
This lady sitting next to you, your spouse. How sweet. Thank you. Other lights.
My daughters.
Daughters, yeah.
Great-grandchildren.
Great-grandchildren.
Great-great-grandchildren.
We are multi-generational here. Great-great-grandchildren, yeah. If I can ask, how many of you are visiting here over Thanksgiving? Welcome, welcome. You are a light to the people you are visiting, I'm sure of it. How many of you are here in Stevensville for a long time, more than you would share to say out loud? You are a light to this community, your presence and your witness in this space. Okay, well, there are also places where we experience darkness. So bring to mind an image of dark or a dark space. This might be connected to a memory, and I'm going to let you define darkness however you want. Think on it. What comes to mind when you hear that word dark or darkness?
Sorrow.
Sorrow.
Mental illness.
Mental illness.
Alone.
Alone.
Loss.
Loss.
Addictions.
Addictions.
When our son died.
When your son died. Solitude comes to mind. It's interesting to think of these images, these realities of our lives, these truths, and how they coexist. They coexist, and so Advent, this time of preparation, summons us to ready ourselves for God's vision, or vision of life. Now, it's fair to ask why. With all of the other things that we're preparing to do during this holiday season, why should we prepare this? Why ready ourselves for God's vision? I mean, there's no doorbuster deal, right? Or rustic holiday decoration to glam it up. Why look toward this immense idea and reality of life that can hold such mammoth implications for our present and future actions, not to mention give a perspective by which to compare other visions. Why ready ourselves for God's vision for life? I believe Advent calls us to ready ourselves because light in Jesus can penetrate our hearts again this season and for the year in ways that our normal routines can make us unaware of or numb to. When we recognize that God's vision is life, we wake up to purpose and energy that bolsters us in our weariness and strengthens us in our efforts. Life and light penetrate and illuminate something new. These new discoveries can include the shadows within us, as well as the boldness to say to darkness in its diminishing, destructive expressions that it doesn't have the last word. A marker of life is growth and spirit. And thus, life in our hearts, our minds, our bodies, and our souls can bring forth this evolution. So we know why it might matter to ready ourselves. But why is it so hard? Again, when I think of this time, when I prepare, putting up the Christmas tree is pretty easy. Just pop in a holiday movie, plug in the string of lights, and sit back and enjoy, right? Other preparations come with a bit of fun. Decorating cookies, eating cookies, whichever comes first. Decorating the house, singing Christmas carols. Readying for Christ in Jesus requires waiting. We talk to Lydia about that, and we say, just be patient, wait. We say waiting is hard. I think we can all agree with that. We may be waiting for healing. We may be waiting for what seems impossible. No doubt that when a loved one dies, waiting on Jesus at Christmas can be like a strangely placed hope in a greater healer. The one who heals all of the wounds and yet starts out in swaddling clothes. But I believe the act of waiting, living into that perfect, grace-filled time of God called Kairos, is part of the balm we receive in Jesus at Christmas. Waiting helps us cultivate the healing that comes with Christmas. Another reason why it's so hard to ready ourselves for God's vision of life in light comes from the fact that we're not always good at perceiving and seeing well. We can be overstuffed by culture. I mean, angels came to share with Mary and Joseph and the shepherds that the Messiah would be born, and these angels were practically impossible to miss. So much so that they all cowered in fear. And the angel said, "Do not be afraid." I can't imagine what those angels fully look like, but I haven't seen one lately. At least the way they describe it in the Gospels. I haven't seen one exactly like that. The book of Hebrews says that when we care for a stranger, we might be caring for an angel unaware. So somehow the angels 2,000 years ago appeared differently than they do now. So when we wait and we intentionally ready ourselves, I wonder how much we're actually cultivating eyes to see angels, to hear the voice of peace, to follow that beckoning to freedom, to know the ones before us as sacred. A friend of mine sent me a letter this week sharing her longing of hope in the midst of this urgent struggle to address and reverse climate crisis, even though she's disheartened by so much. I try not to be discouraged, she writes. I need to make more significant changes quickly, but I pray every day about this and try my best to trust and have faith that the Lord is in this work. I believe it's in these desperate gaps between hope and reality that readying ourselves to God's life and light builds our capacity to bridge or at least hold the tension in these tragic gaps. It's here. It's in these tragic gaps, this chasm, that darkness can seem so pervasive and prevalent, especially as a negative quality of creation, if not a demonic reality unto itself. But somehow, God doesn't reject anything, including darkness. Instead, God's vision of life utilizes all sorts of tools, including darkness. Darkness is not an enemy or something to avoid. It's the reality to mark and in which to expect something to be birthed. Again, think of that womb. It is the dark place where the time of nourishment takes hold of a small child. It offers space of life to fully develop. When they saw my nephew, my brother and sister-in-law didn't open up wide and just begin, right? Instead, it was the tools that allowed them to see what was happening in the dark. They saw the outlines of the head and the arms and those other telling pieces. All of that was what happened. All of that was seen because of the contrast to the dark womb in which the baby grew. Seeds do the same thing, and roots right now. Sometimes I think of winter as vacation time for plants. But in fact, this is the time when they're doing most of their work. They're cultivating the nourishment and sending out signals to one another to continue to grow and get ready. So when spring comes along, they can burst forth. There's readying right now. There's a lot of action taking place in the most dark of places of dirt. And at the level of our hearts and psyches, when we are completely vulnerable, even broken, new life and healing can emerge from the dark night of the soul, as John Cross labels it. Darkness, even slight, echoes the presence of light in such shadows. There's a story in our devotional book that we're reading as a church. And if you'd like one, let me know and we'll make sure we order another one for you. But it's a story of shadows. A man finds himself in the desert and decides to follow his shadow every day. Every day, every day. And so as the sun comes up, he doesn't look toward it. Instead, he follows his shadow. But if you know anything about shadows, it bends with the light, right? And so here comes this man circling back to where he was. He finds that he lacks direction, but that he also is doing this alone because he is focused on that shadow and nothing else. Well, one day he hears a voice, "Just stop it. Just stop it." That was before the dawn came up, and as the sun grew, the tug of his shadow pulled him, and he continued to walk with his shadow, following his shadow. But that voice inside, that voice crying out, somehow stayed in his mind. It somehow told him that there was a different way. So one morning he decided, before the light shone, that he would turn from the dark west wind to the ever-illuminating bright east. And as the sun rose, he stood in front of the light, being brighter than he had ever imagined it to be. He felt a little strange, a little lost at first, but then he heard that voice inside again say, "Take a step." And he followed the light. And for the first time in his life, he saw that he had direction and someone with him. These light and shadows coexist. And they might actually pivot. We might actually pivot from darkness to face light and a new vision and direction. but it requires that darkness to give us a sense of what else is out there. Embracing the work of readying ourselves for God's vision of life and the tool of darkness, we can examine what to do with this paradox. Look for the light that is Christ all around you. Guard your hearts. We can guard our hearts against darkness as the destroyer, as hopelessness, as cynicism. And we can turn toward the light from the shadows, even the ones that we create within ourselves. Maybe that we create when we just marvel and gaze in general. Holding paradox requires awe, an amazement, and requires wonder, a not knowing but seeking holy curiosity. As I shared with the kids, I'm amazed by lights, and specifically stars, because they do show how our world is so complex and so mysterious that the light that we see right now could actually be that of a star that no longer shines. That the ones that no longer shine actually give us something to see by, perhaps something that we now comprehend. And so I wonder how it is with Jesus. How is God's preparation and vision of life since creation being known only now? What does this say about God's eternal wisdom and vision? What does it say about the gift of seeing and being with God? What does it say about the way our lives might be a new star and a light extending that first light of Christ from creation, made full in Jesus and now illuminated again in you and I? Those are the prayers, those are the questions that I invite you to ponder this week as you consider light and darkness in your own life. And I'm going to close with a prayer from a hermit in ancient Syria. Grant me, Lord, at this time, a mind filled with love of you, and one that bears knowledge of you, an intellect filled with insight of you, and a pure heart in which the light of the vision of you shines out. Amen.